Do you remember that taste? Not just any taste, that specific, unforgettable flavor that hits you like a time machine. One second you're an adult with bills and responsibilities, the next, you're 8 years old, sitting on a curb in the summer sunshine, absolutely buzzing off an electric blue fizzy drink. These aren't just foods. These are memories. Little edible portals straight back to being a kid in the UK. So, we're cracking open the biscuit tin of British nostalgia, diving deep into 15 foods and drinks from your childhood, some gone forever, some miraculously back, and all of them utterly, perfectly, wonderfully British. Let's go. Today, we are doing something a little different. Something that is going to hit you right in the nostalgia bone, or maybe more accurately, the nostalgia taste buds. We're talking about iconic, sometimes tragically discontinued, always deeply beloved British foods and drinks that were an essential part of growing up in the UK. Whether that was the 80s, the 90s, or the early 2000s, this one's for you. Get ready to feel hungry, a little wistful, possibly a bit smug that you remember all of these, and maybe, just maybe, a tiny bit annoyed that some of them no longer exist. 15 items. Let's do this. 15. Panda Pops. Let's kick things off with something sweet, something vibrant, and something that practically needed its own UV light to be fully appreciated. Panda Pops. Oh, the sheer, unfiltered joy of choosing your flavor. Blue raspberry, cherry, bubblegum, strawberry. They were the ultimate party drink, the reward after a long swimming lesson, the currency of primary school birthday parties. My personal favorite? The bright green one. Now, nobody, and I mean nobody, could agree on what flavor it actually was. Plum? Apple? Some sort of radioactive sherbet hybrid? Half the fun was the debate. These little bottles were so intensely colored, they practically glowed in the dark. You'd drink one and your tongue would be a completely different color for the rest of the afternoon, and somehow that felt like a badge of honor. Panda Pops were discontinued in 2011. And honestly, the world got slightly less colorful that day. What was your favorite Panda Pop? Comment below. I want to see which flavor wins. Space Raiders. A snack so simple, so fundamentally perfect, that it honestly shouldn't work as well as it does. Ladies and gentlemen, Space Raiders. These alien-shaped corn snacks came in pickled onion or beef flavor, and they were an absolute lunchtime staple. That first bite, that powerful, tangy crunch, was genuinely unlike anything else on the market. And they felt different to ordinary crisps, didn't they? There was something almost rebellious about Space Raiders. Maybe it was the aggressive flavoring. Maybe it was the alien heads. Maybe it was the fact that the foil packets were almost impossible to open without making an enormous scene. You'd sit there in the school canteen, wrestling with that packet, and by the time you finally got in, you'd earned those Raiders. It felt like completing a quest just to get your snack. Here's the good news. Space Raiders are actually still around. You can find them in corner shops and online. But do they taste the same? Honestly, that's a whole debate. The nostalgia factor adds a flavor that no manufacturer can replicate. Did anyone collect the little alien characters on the packets? Or just me? 3. Arctic Roll. Moving on to something a little more substantial now. Something that lived in every family freezer and made an appearance at virtually every Sunday lunch, every birthday, every "we don't have a proper pudding" moment. The Arctic Roll. For the uninitiated, and I truly pity you, the Arctic Roll was a cylindrical vanilla ice cream log, wrapped in a thin layer of sponge cake, with a thin stripe of raspberry jam running through it. That's it. That is the entire concept. And yet, it was absolutely magnificent. There was something deeply comforting about it. It was always slightly too cold, slightly too frosty, and you'd always cut the slices slightly too thick. It had this freezer aisle charm that no artisan gelato could ever replicate. The Arctic Roll has had revivals over the years. Birds, I brought it back. But nothing quite beats the memory of that original, pulled straight from a slightly iced-over freezer drawer. Pure, uncomplicated nostalgia on a plate. 12. Cadbury's Dream Bar. Now let's talk about chocolate. Specifically, let's talk about the bar that was criminally overlooked, persistently underrated, and absolutely adored by its loyal fan base. The Cadbury Dream Bar. White chocolate perfection. Smooth, creamy, with that unmistakably Cadbury richness. While everyone was busy arguing about Dairy Milk versus Boost versus Crunchy, Dream fans quietly knew they had the best thing in the range. It was discontinued, which remains a genuine tragedy, but it did have a brief, glorious comeback that proved exactly how much it was missed. The internet practically erupted when the news broke. If Cadbury ever reads comment sections, and I like to think somewhere, someone does, please, people have spoken. Were you a Dream Bar fan? Let me know in the comment section. 11. Bien Biscuits. Here's one that I genuinely feel doesn't get talked about enough in these nostalgic circles. Bien Biscuits. 2 sweet biscuits sandwiched together with a chocolate filling, stamped with a little smiley face on the front. Simple. Brilliant. Perfect. Bien Biscuits were a lunchbox icon. There was something almost philosophical about eating a biscuit that was smiling at you. It was genuinely impossible to be in a bad mood while eating a bien. They were engineered for happiness. They were a French import, funnily enough, but they became so deeply embedded in British childhood that they feel quintessentially ours. Bien Biscuits are still available in some supermarkets and online, so if you've never revisited them, today's the day. Tep clear. Right, we need to talk about one of the great mysteries of the 1990s soft drink landscape. A drink so baffling, so genuinely confusing, that it became legendary purely through the power of its own weirdness. Tap Clear. This was Coca-Cola's 1993 attempt at a clear cola. A transparent, colorless drink that looked exactly like lemonade, but tasted like a lighter, slightly ghostly version of cola. Your brain simply refuses to process it. You'd pour it into a glass, see something that looked like sparkling water, take a sip, and experience a full cognitive short circuit. It looked wrong. It tasted confusingly right, but also wrong. Tab Clear lasted less than a year before it was quietly discontinued. It was ahead of its time, possibly behind its time, or possibly just completely outside of time altogether. A true artifact of 90s experimental beverage culture. Would you drink it again? Absolutely. Would you be confused again? 100%. 9. Campari Orangeade / Classic Cordials. Now, sometimes nostalgia isn't about a specific discontinued product. It's about a flavor, a feeling, a particular shade of bright orange in a plastic cup at a village fete. Campa Orangeade and its many brightly colored cousins were the backbone of every school summer fair, every church hall gathering, every sticky-floored youth disco. Intensely sweet, almost artificially orange, and absolutely perfect in context. There's a whole category of British childhood drink that operates on pure occasion. These weren't everyday drinks. They were event drinks. And that made them taste better than anything you could rationally justify. Even now, a sip of something intensely orange and slightly too sweet can transport you straight back to a plastic chair in a drafty village hall, and honestly, that's beautiful. Spangles. For those of us with parents or older siblings who've passed down the legend, or those of you old enough to actually remember, let's talk about Spangles. Square, boiled sweets with hard shells and intensely fruity centers. Old English flavors like aniseed and butterscotch. They were a sweet shop staple from the 1950s right through to the 1980s, when they were unceremoniously discontinued. Spangles have become almost mythological in British confectionery history. People speak of them with the reverence usually reserved for lost civilizations. There's a petition, seemingly always running, to bring them back. Mars briefly revived them in the 90s for a limited run, which only intensified the longing when they disappeared again. They represent a whole era of British sweet shop culture that has gradually, painfully, faded away. 7. Umbongo. They drink it in the Congo. If that jingle didn't just play in your head at full volume, I'm not sure we can be friends. Umbongo was the exotic, tropical fruit juice drink that felt like an adventure in a carton. Mango, passion fruit, guava. Flavors that felt genuinely thrilling in an era when exotic fruit was not yet a major supermarket category. The cartoon adverts were legendary. The jingle was inescapable. The product itself was genuinely delicious, thick, sweet, and deeply satisfying in a way that felt special. Umbongo is technically still available in some forms, though it's had a complicated journey through ownership changes and reformulations. But that original carton, that specific flavor combination, that jingle playing in your head at school, that's locked in the memory banks forever. 6. Texan Bar. This is a mighty chew. If you know, you know. The Texan Bar was a chocolate-covered caramel and nougat confection that was absolutely enormous by the standards of the era, endlessly chewy, and accompanied by an advertising campaign so committed to its Wild West theme that it became iconic. Texan Bars were discontinued in 1984, which means for many of you watching this, they exist purely in the realm of inherited nostalgia, passed down by parents who still occasionally stare wistfully into the middle distance when someone mentions them. They were briefly revived in the early 90s before disappearing again, which is arguably crueler than just leaving them gone. To give something back and then take it away again? That's villainous. The Texan Bar represents a whole era of British confectionery that was bigger, chewier, more committed to its own concept, and absolutely unafraid to be exactly what it was. Not immediately remember the name, but the moment I describe it, something will click. Quattro was Coca-Cola's 1980s attempt at a 4-fruit-flavored fizzy drink, a blend of citrus fruits that was bold, sharp, and deeply refreshing. The name was the concept, 4 fruits combined. It was launched with enormous enthusiasm, backed by significant advertising spend, and it didn't last. By the early 90s, it had been quietly retired. But for those who remember it, Quattro holds a very specific place in the 80s drinks landscape. It's one of those drinks that sits just on the edge of mainstream memory, not quite famous enough to be universally remembered, but absolutely beloved by those who do. A hidden gem of the British soft drink golden age. For Fab Ice Lolly. Now here's one that, good news, you can actually still get. But hear me out, because there's a conversation to be had about whether it's truly the same experience. The Fab Ice Lolly. Strawberry ice cream on a stick, covered in a thin layer of chocolate, topped with hundreds and thousands. It was perfection. It was architecture. It was art. The specific experience of eating a Fab is deeply tied to memory. The way the chocolate cracked. The contrast between the cold ice cream and the texture of the sprinkles. The race against the summer sun. Fab lollies are still in production, and they're still genuinely good. But nothing will ever fully replicate the experience of being handed one from an ice cream van on a blazing July afternoon, sun in your eyes, absolutely certain that life doesn't get better than this. Because it doesn't. It really doesn't. 3. Potato waffles in the original format. Stay with me here, because this one is slightly more philosophical. Bird's eye potato waffles are, obviously, still very much available. They're a British institution. But what we're memorializing here is a specific experience. The potato waffle as an after-school tea staple, served with beans, possibly a fried egg, at 5:30 in the afternoon, in a kitchen that smelled of cooking and warmth. The waffle itself was grid-patterned perfection, crispy on the outside, fluffy on the inside, with those little square indentations that were made, seemingly by design, to hold beans. It was functional beauty. Food nostalgia is often less about the food and more about the context. The after-school hunger. The specific exhaustion of a school day. The comfort of a predictable, reliable tea. Potato waffles, for millions of British kids, are inseparable from that feeling. Long may they continue. And long may we remember why they matter. 2. Pacers. We are almost at the top of our list, and I wanted to save one of the genuinely heartbreaking entries for near the end. Pacers. Pacers were mint and spearmint flavored chews, rectangular, striped in green and white, with a refreshing flavor that was sharp without being aggressive. They were part of the Rowntree's family, alongside Opal Fruits and Starburst and all those other beloved names. They were discontinued in the late 1990s, and their loss was genuinely mourned. The confectionery landscape felt slightly emptier without them. Now here's the interesting thing about Pacers. They occupy a very specific nostalgia space. They're not mainstream enough to be universally mourned, younger audiences have never experienced them, but for those who remember, they represent something lost that feels genuinely irreplaceable. You can still find spearmint chews. You can approximate the experience. But the exact formulation, the specific texture, the particular striped wrapper? Gone. And that matters. Do you remember Pacers? What other sweets do you miss? Let me know in the comments section. 1. Findus Crispy Pancakes. And here we are. Number 1. I want to be clear, I considered many contenders for this top spot. The debate was fierce. But ultimately, when we talk about a food that was quintessentially, uniquely, specifically British childhood, there is only one answer. Findus Crispy Pancakes. These were frozen, breadcrumb-coated pancakes, filled with either minced beef and onion, cheese and ham, or chicken and mushroom. You'd cook them in the oven or the pan, and they'd come out crispy on the outside, and dangerously, volcanically hot on the inside. Every British child who grew up eating crispy pancakes has a specific memory of burning the roof of their mouth because they could not wait. You knew it was going to be hot. You'd been warned. You did it anyway. Every single time. There was something transcendent about that filling. That slightly gooey, intensely savory interior contrasted with the crunch of the crumb exterior. It was simple. It was possibly nutritionally questionable. It was absolutely perfect. Findus Crispy Pancakes disappeared from UK shelves in the 2000s after the Findus brand went through various ownership changes. Their loss left a crispy pancake-shaped hole in the freezer aisle that has never truly been filled. Some supermarkets have produced own-brand versions. They are not the same. They will never be the same. The original Findus Crispy Pancake exists now only in memory and in the slightly singed roof of every millennial mouth in the country. Here's the thing about all of these forgotten flavors. They're not just about taste. They're not really about whether Panda Pops were objectively better than the drinks we have now, or whether a Findus Crispy Pancake would hold up to adult scrutiny. They're about moments. They're about the specific texture of a Tuesday afternoon when you were 9. The feeling of summer holidays and no responsibilities. The comfort of predictable treats in an unpredictable world. Food and drink are uniquely, powerfully connected to memory. A smell or a taste can unlock emotions that words and photos sometimes can't reach. That's why we care so much about these things. Not because they were objectively extraordinary, but because they were ours. They're little edible bookmarks in the story of who we used to be. And there's something genuinely lovely about that. So, there we have it. 15 forgotten flavors of British childhood, ranked and remembered with all the love and mild anguish they deserve. But now, and this is the bit I'm genuinely excited for, I want to hear from you. What forgotten flavor did I miss? What's the one snack, the one drink, the one biscuit or sweet or freezer staple that you desperately, urgently wish would make a comeback? What's your number one? Leave it in the comments. Let's build the definitive list together. Because honestly, some of these deserve petitions, not just comments. If you enjoyed this particular trip down memory lane, and I genuinely hope it brought back some good ones, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find the channel, and more people finding the channel means more nostalgia content, which means everyone wins. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we do this kind of thing regularly: UK history, culture, nostalgia, and the occasional deep dive into things that are surprisingly interesting when you look closely enough. Thank you so much for watching. Look after yourselves, look after each other, and for the love of everything good in this world, someone please bring back the Findus Crispy Pancake. See you next time. Cheers.